What's going on, Sideboard Podcast? This is your host, Caleb Williamson, and with me today we have Timothy David Clunt. What's going on, Tim?
Not much. How's it going, Caleb?
It's going good.
Got that full name action in there this time.
Yeah, I know. It's because it's your Facebook profile name.
Yeah. I forgot I did that.
I don't know why. It's like engraved into my brain or something.
You'll never forget it.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. But yeah, I'm doing pretty good. It's just been working and, enjoyed the holidays with the family, kind of quiet. But that was pretty good. How about yourself? How are you doing?
Pretty good. Had a nice holiday. Been pretty crazy the last few days. Work's been a tornado, but I mean, it happens. But I mean, yeah,
for sure.
New year. So looking forward to what's to come this year.
Yeah, dude. You and me and the entire nation both. Everyone's excited for some change.
Yo, starting off good.
But anyways, yeah, that's good. That's good. Good to be employed, roof over your head, all those things.
Oh yeah.
All right, well, we have a pretty interesting topic for today for our listeners. So let's just dig right into it. The title of today's episode, or the theme of it, is going to be new decks versus legacy decks, or old decks, as we like to call them, legacy, because of Magic and those sorts of things. So the concept is, why do players build new decks? New as in like the newest, most like recent set, as well as in the meta, why do new decks form, and why do old decks still keep up with the new decks if like things like power creep and other things we're going to get into are at hand. So just like a first glance at that topic, Tim, what are some of your thoughts as far as new versus old, maybe some decks that come to mind, or some stories that you at an event you decided to play like an old deck or a new deck or something, and it was kind of interesting?
I've definitely taken decks that are out of the format into events before, with varying degrees of results, but part of that comes with like deck construction, and I know we did like a whole series on that, but just because like an archetype may not be in the best position and in a certain meta doesn't mean that you can't construct and configure your deck in a way with the extra slots available to combat the meta and still have your primary game plan. Right. I mean, it's not always going to be good, but most of the time it is still possible. I did that a few times with, different original AOD lists, even when they were not a part of the meta after Dende died. But yeah, it's kind of interesting comparing new versus older legacy decks in DBS to like Magic. Obviously they're different formats, so that's one thing, but I don't know, it's just the way the game mechanically functions is just so different that it's kind of hard to compare them.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it today, because, for example, in the Pro Play Tour event that happened this past weekend, we saw like we saw Vegex. That deck's going to be kind of in the meta for a while.
Yeah.
We saw Dark Broly, which was it's a newer deck, so that was kind of to be expected, although it is kind of a sleeper. And
that's one we've been talking about for a while too.
Oh yeah. I always we both have always said that deck, if you put the time and effort into it, it can be top tier. The main thing I think why it kind of surged was that new Demigra.
Oh yeah, that Demigra is a powerhouse in that deck.
Bro, they're like $40 each. I was like, oh, I just need to buy a couple of cards to update my Dark Broly deck, and I was like, whoa, it's a little more than a couple of cards.
Yeah, I'm glad that I picked those up when they were. I mean, they've been around that price like the whole time. I was able to get kind of a deal though, which was nice.
Yeah, true. But anyways, so my point being, we saw Vegex, which I would say is a legacy deck until, never mind. Rabbit hole. I was gonna say until it gets banned, but
we can just call like those types of decks like evergreen.
Yeah, evergreen. It's always gonna be good somehow. It's gonna adapt. It just takes the player base to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So then we saw Dark Broly, which was like the new deck. Red Broly, new deck. And then Invoker, evergreen.
Yeah.
So.
And then a couple of little goodies sprinkled in.
Yeah, there was a couple of other decks that were there, but like just showing the top 8 of the Pro Play Tour, or I'm pretty sure it was a Pro Play Tour, being like a solid amount of new decks, a solid amount of old decks. That's just really interesting to me because it's like, what drives people to play new decks, right? What drives people to play old decks, And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is just some of those things and reasons why people play new, why people play old. And so anyways, first off, let's just get into why do we play new archetypes. And like the first thing I want to say is because we buy new product.
Yeah. People play new decks because they're fun, new, and exciting.
Yep, exactly. It's like a new toy, everyone's like seeing all the spoilers and getting the new product when it comes out, or even a little bit before it comes out, because Bandai does the whole pre-release thing, and you're excited to play these new decks that are like these cool strategies that haven't been seen before, and you just want to show everyone what you came up with. So I think that's reason number one for like why people play new decks.
Yeah, I mean, part of that just comes with like human nature. Like we're attracted to new things.
Yeah, definitely. And so going along with that is like old things are stale, they get boring. I kind of felt that at the last event we went to, the Rancho event with Senshinran. It was just like I didn't want to play test with that deck,
Yeah,
because
it seems like a not fun deck to test.
It's not, especially when I tested one game against Josh and it took us an hour and a half.
Yeah,
and that's not fun.
No, I can understand that.
Yeah, given like certain decks are different because they're faster and aggro and such, and so it's a little more fun to test those because games go quickly. But I think for a competitive player, old strategies can get real stale real quick.
Yeah.
But so what do you think? What do you think about like why you would play a new deck over, say, Vegex, right? Because Vegex is like your primary deck. So why, if you see like a set 12 deck you like, why are you going to play it in a competitive setting?
A lot of the time with this game specifically, it's because there's a cool archetype built around a character I like. Sometimes it's more competitive than others. Sometimes the deck ends up being super casual, but that's still okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I would say a lot of the times it's the character that the deck is kind of based around, or I'm like reading the cards that that are like obvious to the strategy, and something just clicks. And I know we didn't get into like a heated discussion the other night in our group chat when I was talking about EDH,
Uh-huh.
but it's kind of like that light bulb turns on for like I see something
Yeah.
that's degenerate, and I like to push the envelope. I like to see how far, how fast, things like that. I want to see how much I can push this game before it pushes back.
Right. Yeah. It's like you see an idea or a card, and like you're saying, you want to test its limits, and so you start playing it, and you can either learn things you didn't see on the card initially, which is like a certain type of card that has a lot of playability in my eyes, or B, like the card is just overpowered and strong to begin with, or even C, like the card just sucks and you realize it
Yeah,
quickly.
that
But
one does also happen. Option C
yeah,
does
once in a
happen,
while.
people.
Hot take,
Not
cards suck.
not everything is a banger.
Nope, definitely not. I mean, a lot of people thought like Murchim was like that, the blue 4-drop,
Mhm.
and Marcus showed everyone otherwise pretty much. He's like, nah, this card is great. And even in our team chat, I remember I was like, nah, that card sucks. It doesn't have deflect. And, pretty much you only worry about deflect 25 or 20% of the time, blue.
Yep. You only really have to worry about it
But
if blue is like a strong percentage of the field in that meta.
right. And so, yeah. Anyways, getting back on track to our previous kind of rabbit trail, talking about cards and like testing them and seeing something that is new that you could push its limits. I think that really was why like I originally played the Dark Broly deck, because I saw its flexibility, and that's kind of the card types that I'm drawn to, is like really flexible card types.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just fun. Like, it's overall, I think the best word to describe why people play new things is because it's fun.
Yep. That's pretty accurate, yeah.
Yeah. Did you have any like closing thoughts on why people play new decks?
I know, like, I think the fun factor is a big part of it, especially for the more competitive players. Because like if you just keep grinding out like the same deck for like hours upon hours on end, you're gonna burn out and just not want to play it ever again. And then if say that happens and you do take it to an event, you may know the deck like the back of your hand, but you're gonna be so unhappy playing it that you're gonna make mistakes just because you're unhappy.
Right. Yeah.
So I think
makes sense. Like mindset is 6/10 of your playing.
Yeah, I think that mixing it up a little bit is really important. It also keeps your brain from like staying stagnant, because you're introducing something new. I can't think of the word I'm trying to use. Yes, we'll use the word stimulate. It stimulates your brain when you introduce something new.
Yeah, it like it promotes new growth, like, for example, if you're like a known control player, I would say one of the best things to do to get better at control is to play an aggro deck, because you want to know the ins and outs and like flex the muscles that you don't normally flex. Like, for example, another example off of my yeah it's like athletes, right? Say a runner, they still need to exercise their arms, because you don't realize, but when they pump their arms, it helps them to get that running motion faster.
Yep.
It's the same thing with this game. You need to play new decks constantly to keep your brain fresh.
You
and to
also
understand what you're going to
never
be playing against.
you never know what you might see in the opening rounds of Swiss.
The jungle. Boo.
I've seen some weird stuff. And I've been smacked by some weird stuff.
Bruh.
Like Pan GT when we were in
Pan
Vegas.
GT.
Or no, it wasn't Pan. It was
The starter Goku. It's like Goku Jr. or something. Kid Goku or whatever.
no, it was either Pan or Surge Goku. I think it was Surge Goku. But it was
okay,
straight
Surge
up
Goku
GT. I'm talking like this man went turn 2 spaceship and my brain broke.
You're
And
like, what is this?
At that point he won that game.
Yeah, because you're just like, I don't know what to do.
I was like, space what? But yeah,
Bruh.
stimulate your brain, people. Have
Yeah.
some fun.
Yep.
Sprinkle in some goodness.
Yep.
You can
Keyword
be
fun.
you can be sweaty when you play in a real event.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so enough about new decks. Let's talk about how old decks stay competing.
New cards get printed.
Okay, yeah, that's actually a big one, especially for, I would say, like for Invoker specifically. I have not seen a
Vegex,
set.
yeah.
I have not seen a set not have a good red-blue card in it.
Since that set came out, yeah. It's been
Like,
so we'll
it's
count
been-
that set. So 9, 10, 11, and now 12 is coming, but we've also had these supplemental products.
yeah, so like 4 sets or something like that.
Yeah, it
5.
that deck
or
is not
whatever.
ever going away.
No, evergreen. And I'm okay with that, because I have
Yeah.
the whole deck aside from the $1 billion SCR,
That you
which is okay.
that
It's
you
fine.
sold the night before it spiked.
Shut up, Tim. Shut up.
I almost did the same thing. So
Okay,
the only reason I didn't sell it was because I was being lazy.
shut up.
But yeah.
Yeah. Well, your laziness made you a bunch of potential money, so value. You got value.
Sick. That sweet value.
Okay.
Yeah, new cards coming out in new sets can definitely breathe life into older or even like evergreen decks, because I mean we saw it with like in set 6 they printed like a whole engine for Lord Slug.
Uh-huh.
Or no, I'm sorry, they printed wings specifically.
Yeah.
And that made Slug viable.
Right.
You know, I hate to use Vegito because they keep printing cards for that deck and it never makes it better.
Oh, the red one?
Yeah. The one
That
that
deck's
makes the
trash.
Gokus and Vegetas many colors. They keep
Yeah, that
printing
deck's
stuff for
trash.
that deck,
Trash.
but it never gets any better. Sorry, Dustin, if you're listening.
Oh, he better listen.
That's
Because,
true.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like I mean, there's only so many characters in the Dragon Ball IP, right? So you're gonna
Yeah.
have to come up with, new cards for the same characters. Like in the case of Vegito, they keep doing it, but it's
Yeah.
not making any better. So maybe they need to take a different route with that character, or do
Right.
what they've been doing, which is reboot old leaders. That's another way older decks can stay competing, is they reboot the leader.
Yeah.
We've
it's-
seen like 4 reboot leaders be at least somewhat competitively playable now.
Yeah, and we're going to get more next set for sure. Mecha, I mean, he's coming back.
Yeah, there's Gohan, Hit, SS3 Saw Play, Soul Strikers getting played, and then from the new set we've got Announcer, Mecha, maybe Bergamo.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's because like the fundamentals of the game change, and so you have to redo like an archetype slightly, or redo its baseline. But when you do it, it changes things.
Yeah, and so specifically in the case of like the reboot leaders, if they don't change it too much, people who pick up the reboot leader, they're gonna have this degree of familiarity with the deck and with the leader because it's not that much different.
Right. Perfect example of that is my Metacooler deck that I took to the shop championships a few sets ago. People didn't know what the 7-drop did, so when I played it, they were like, "Oh, okay, that's fine." And I'm like, "This is gonna bring out 4 dudes
It was
that are
not
gonna swing
fine.
at you." And they were like, "Oh, I ain't got nothing for that." I'm like, "You're about to die."
The only thing that could really answer that was getting played at that time was Overdrive.
Yeah, right.
Frieza 100% Overdrive.
Now we got stupid charismatic, bro. That card would wreck that deck.
Yeah,
Broken.
that card is so good.
All the counterplays are broken.
I think if that was 6 or less, it would have been perfect. 7
So
is a
much more balanced.
little bit egregious.
7 hits like so many
It
quote
hits-
unquote bombs.
It hits like everything in the game that gets played.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, so moving forward with why old decks keep competing, we have the next 2 things, which they actually go hand in hand. It's going to be practice and deck mastery. So when obviously you practice a lot, you get to a level with the deck where you have quote unquote mastered it in a given format. You know, you've played against all the possibles you can think of. You've played casual players, competitive players, people that play differently, and you just know how to play against all of them. So then it just comes down to RNG, and that's the only thing that can, like, you know, stop your optimal plays.
Yep.
And then so practice goes along with that. So if you want to get good at an older deck, you need to play it a lot and understand how it fundamentally operates and how you need to change the fundamentals of that deck in order to keep up with the new strategies, or, you know, keep up / defend against / whatever you want to call it. For example, Invoker is running 3 of the Invoker Vegetas rather than 4 because sometimes you can't drop it on 3. Like against Red Broly, you're probably not invokering them. You're just going for like value, which is why they dropped the Vegeta down to 3 and they play 2 of the Arrival Coolers because you need a threat for 1 mana.
Yeah, like on turn 3 in that matchup, I feel like Invoker, what they need to do is basically just pass on their turn, and then once they swing with any non 1-drop part of their chain, just Sleepy Boy it. That buys them an entire turn.
Sleepy Boy it or Arrival and kill it with the cooler.
Yeah, you could kill
like that.
Well, I don't know what the power on the 3-drop is.
I don't know, but I know the 1-drops are like 4K.
Yeah, well, the issue with hitting a 1-drop is if they play the TPs, they could also just start another chain with the other 1-drop. So you really want to aim to hit the 3-drop.
Bro, imagine them tapping out to play the TP, playing 2 1-drops, right? Because that's doesn't it play another 1-drop?
I'm not sure.
Anyways, it's like Crit of Life, start another chain, and then imagine they swing lead and you Arrival your coolers and wipe both chains.
That would be fire.
I think it'd be broken. But anyways, that's an example of deck mastery allowing you to adapt. Yeah, exactly. Like Tim's saying, adapt to the meta. And, you know, like Tim plays Vegex, and I think his Vegex deck has changed, especially like the tech cards, 30 different times, you know?
Yeah, and also like part of that comes with playing a deck that is extremely forgiving. Like it with Vegex, it sucks when you mill things that you really need to draw, But if you build your deck in a way that turbos through your deck, you will end up drawing those cards the second time you go through, if your opponent's not dead before then.
It's inevitability. I mean, we keep going back to Vegex and Invoker, but like Tim said, the reason why they're still competing is because they have a strategy that can hang with any strategy in the game. Vegex mills itself and gets free value, and Invoker, if you don't kill it by a certain turn, it will burn you to death.
It will just kill you in one turn from
without
nowhere.
Interaction.
Yeah. And it's, I wish there were other decks to keep bringing up over and over again, because I know like people hate hearing about Invoker, hate hearing about Vegex, but they play the game on like a totally different axis than the rest of the game does.
Right. Like all the best decks are like, so if you imagine a graph, like Tim said, right? You have your X and your Y axis, and you know, all the fair decks are playing along the X axis, and then these like weird decks are playing along the Y axis within the like unfair, because they're at a level of weirdness, yet they still have the value of all the like quote unquote fair decks are at the both axes. They have a nice like slope. And then there's decks that are, you know, on the Z axis, right? So you introduce a new 3D axis, and it's like they don't interact the same way that normal decks do. And that's why they're like evergreen or legacy.
Yeah, and a good example of that, which might have been a little bit worse than like a Z axis, was U3 Vegex. That was just that deck was not Dragon Ball Super.
No, that deck
was extremely fun. Not just because of how like 100% consistent it was, but it was just fun to play.
Yeah, because it was sequencing. You know, it was like, how do you master sequencing?
It honestly, it felt a lot like Legacy Storm in Magic. And like you know, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners do, because I talk about Legacy when we bring up Magic. I love that format. That format is so fun because it makes you battle your opponent's brain, not their wallet.
Right.
So like, that's something like a lot of local Legacy metas for Magic. They'll just allow unlimited proxies because they want to actually play the game. They don't want to have a game be determined by a budget restriction of one player. Like if we both have the most optimal, most competitive list possible, I want to see how good I am versus you, not how good my unlimited budget is against your limited budget.
Right. Like going along with that in an event, it's like a super, I don't know why, but like whenever I win a match and my opponent's like, and I'm like, you know, oh man, you didn't see your insert X card here, that's super expensive, right? And they're like, oh yeah, I actually don't own any of those, but it's like necessary for that deck at the top tier. It feels like the win is almost invalid. Like I didn't beat that deck at its best, you know? And it's nothing to bash like the opponent who can't afford that card or doesn't want to pay the full price or whatever, but it's like, as a competitive player, both you and I'm sure you agree with me on this, we want to fight a deck at its best, because if we can't beat it at its best and we can only beat it at its weakest, we know that's not good enough.
Yes. Also, you will bluff me every single time if you don't own like the meta card for a deck. I will play around it. We've had games where like I know you physically do not own the card, and I still play around it thinking you do own it, just because of how my brain is wired to play games. Like I naturally just shift to my opponent is playing the most optimal version of the deck. And I think
hot take there. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think I started thinking that way when I started playing Legacy like all the time in Magic.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, So what I was gonna say is the hot take there is when I borrow cards from Brandon or don't tell you guys when I got a mail day or whatever, and it's like I actually do have the card. That's when it's funny. You're like, dang it, he has it.
There's been
But anyways,
there's been so many times we've been testing, and like I know for a fact, because like we've gone over the deck list to like see if we need to make changes, and I know you physically don't have the card, and I end up still playing around it. And it's just I don't understand why I do it, but I just thought it was kind of funny. Oh, we lost you for a second.
right? Yeah.
You're back. You're good.
Sorry, I think I'm back now.
Yep, we're good. We
Okay,
got him,
cool.
people.
Yeah, sorry. My internet is not the greatest right now. Sorry, guys.
What else we have here?
Yeah, let's move forward. So,
Got a
just looking at my notes
beard
here.
hair on my tongue. Delicious.
Oh, gross. So we went over like what it means to have a legacy strategy, which is where like a deck has something that they're so efficient at that they won't ever leave the competitive scene, as long as Bandai keeps like giving them a little bit of support. We talked about that, and we talked about basically our examples of those decks. So just to kind of close out or summarize the 2 points, it was, why do people play new decks? 1, it's fun. 2, it's new, so it's fun. And 3, you have to keep playing new things to keep your brain fresh.
Yep.
And then to summarize, why do people play old decks? It's because they've practiced it a whole bunch and they didn't want to buy the new stuff, or the new stuff didn't really interest them. Like Tim was saying, the characters are a big deal, especially in games like this where there's so much like anime support and all that. And you know, going in with that, their deck just stays competing. There's no reason for them to change. You know, if it's what they feel most comfortable with, then they're going to play it.
There is
And so,
another
just
one
to kind
I
of wrap
thought
things
of.
up here a little bit. Okay, go ahead.
Another reason people play old decks is the nostalgia.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you know, I played Storm for a while. I played completely unbanned Storm against like normal decks in this meta, and it wasn't like super broken unless I drew like the absolute nut or something.
Yeah.
But it was interesting.
Sometimes
But I played it just for fun.
Yeah, it's just fun to, you know, take a trip down memory lane, and it also kind of shows you like how the game has evolved.
Yeah, they're playing on a different base.
Yeah, and
now
it's cool because you also get to see like the fundamental change in design.
Right.
That's just something I
And the
find
progress.
interesting. Yeah.
Definitely, it's totally interesting. You know, if you look at the game, maybe we'll do an episode like that where it's like we did. It was the retro episode, the retro cast with my brother.
Oh yeah.
We went over like all the past degenerate meta decks and analyzed them and like why they got banned or whatever. But yeah, you guys should totally check that out. It might give you a little bit of insight into Bandai's brain as far as design goes.
Yep, I will try to leave a card for that one at the end of this video.
Absolutely. So just check the link, boys. Okay, so wrapping up, a couple of hot takes, or hot topics, I should say. What is power creep? Go.
Oh, I'm gonna get so much crap for this.
Oh.
Ooh.
Do you want me to go first?
It's bad design philosophy.
Okay. So pulling it out of the game itself into the designer's point of view and stuff, it's power creep is like you're saying it's a bad design philosophy. So are you saying the inevitability of it is bad design, or like if a game requires power creep for new stuff to be good, it's bad design?
So if the only way new product is playable or selling is because it just absolutely wipes the floor with the previous product. I think that's bad design.
Yeah. I would say a good example of that was when Unisons and the free counterplays were introduced.
Mm-hmm.
If you weren't playing those and you weren't Reboot Gohan, then you probably weren't winning.
I've got a very obvious example. Violent Predator going directly into a block that cares about monocolor.
Yeah, that's a really good example, actually. And it
And
required
then they
an insta-ban.
banned it for the sole purpose of selling the new product.
Yeah.
Whereas
its
they
impact
could
on
have
the new
just
stuff.
designed the card in a way where that didn't need to happen.
Right. It's always like a slippery slope.
And
when you take
I'm not trying to like bash Bandai or the game devs or anything, but I think it's something important for all of us players and anyone from Bandai who may be listening or watching to like keep in the back of their mind when they're designing new cards.
Right. Yeah, you should always be thinking about like, what does this card do 4 sets from now, right? If we don't have a way besides banning to make this card not obliterate something or be obliterated by something, and if it's one of the cards that are in the high complexity budget of the game, so like the top competitive cards, because some cards are obviously casual.
Yeah.
And so if it's one of those more competitive cards that in a couple of sets is just going to be obsolete, maybe, there's a little bit of design flaw here.
And that's part of why it's like important to have like the devs or the R&D, the research and development teams, and the game testers or play testers or whatever they are technically called with Bandai, having them test not just that set in a vacuum, but testing the new cards with the format as a whole, so that you see when something is going to be a problem.
Right. Yeah.
And you can address it before cards begin printing.
Right. Yeah. Which is like it takes an extremely high amount of foresight, because you have to print cards. You probably have to have the final list of cards like 6 to 8 months in advance or something like that, because printing probably happens.
That's around the right timeline, is 6 to 8 months.
I think it's worth it. It's worth it to put the time in to make the game last longer. You put the 6 to 8 months for planning in, and you're planning 6 to 8 months a year, 2 years out, but that means your game's going to last 10, 20, 30 years longer.
Mm-hmm.
Magic, primary example.
And that's not to say they're perfect either, because
yeah, absolutely not.
Oko was very broco.
We could go on about power creep and like complain about it forever, but let's just talk about my take on it, which is I think power creep, and I learned these concepts that I'm about to introduce from another game designer from a different type of game, a tabletop game. But I think power creep is somewhat inevitable in the idea of, instead of calling it power creep, call it complexity. And so imagine you have a budget, right? When you're designing a game, you have a complexity budget. You only have a certain amount you can introduce to any given card, and eventually it's going to run out before things become too complex to where like your format is best of 3, but because my deck does so many different things, it's really a best of 1 or something like that, where this card just doesn't make any sense and there's so much clarification needed, or stuff like that, when you're introducing new mechanics. And as you continue to just salt and pepper a little more complexity into cards, they tend to get a little stronger, or not even necessarily just straight stronger, but like we were talking about before, more flexible, which could mean stronger, like the Dark Broly deck, right?
Mhm.
They're 30k, and they're more or less just 30ks, which we already had with Kitku, but they have effects and they have weird ways to bring them out. And so they're very, like, a lot more complex.
Yeah.
And so if you imagine power creep as increasing complexity, then it's kind of a good thing because your game's getting cooler, you know?
Yeah, and that was something I was hoping you were gonna touch on. Is there are aspects to it that are good. I mean, that's why we like to play with new things. They're new and
Exactly.
shiny.
Yeah, they're more
but
complex.
There's definitely a level or a line that needs to not be crossed repeatedly. You
Yeah,
know,
I think it has to deal with
sometimes
time.
slip-ups happen,
Right.
but when the same thing keeps happening every set release, then I think that's when you need to make changes fundamentally.
Yeah, which, like, back in the U3 set, Invoker U3, that sort of thing, I think they were at that sort of fine line point with the complexity where, okay, these cards on paper or in a vacuum are not like super broken, but once you
Once you
open it up,
play with the entire card pool, then
it's like,
there's
this
a
isn't
problem.
okay. Right. And so I think the formula is like finding the proper complexity budget over time, and, you know, slowly introducing more complex. Or you can also just shift the axis, and, like, instead of a gain in power, just a shift into where, like, the whole game up until now has been focused on dealing damage. But what if there's a deck that's focused on gaining life? Like, they don't really care about dealing damage, you know, like they're doing, right? So there's different avenues you can go to make things playable without taking up too much complexity or power creep. But yeah, so closing thoughts is power creep healthy for a game? Personally, I think it depends on how fast it happens. A really good example of a game where I think it's happening a little too fast is Digimon, the Digimon TCG. I think looking at the new cards, some of the stuff is just like, whoa, slow down.
Yeah,
but maybe that's part of their design philosophy
first.
for the Chrono Clash system style games. Yeah. But what do you think, Tim? Just as a closing thought, is complexity budget / power creep unhealthy for a game?
I don't think it's unhealthy in and of itself. Like you said, it is inevitable. I just think that whoever is in the developer seat needs to be careful and be wary of what they're creating.
Yeah.
And kind of on that note, before we wrap things up, I do want to just give a quick message from our sponsor, and then a couple other places where you guys can help to support us keep Caleb's fancy lights on. Our sponsor, they
look nice. Okay,
they do. I'm a fan. Madtown TCG, check them out. They've got tons of sealed product for multiple different games. They've got really cool little knick-knack things like terrariums. They've got Funko Pops, whole bunch of stuff. They're super awesome. Check them out. Let them know that we sent you. Any singles y'all might be looking for, if you're trying to hop on the Dark Broly train or Invoker or what have you, or you're just trying to prepare, grab some older cards for some new decks that are popping up, getting some new life, check out our TCGPlayer affiliate link. It costs you a whopping $0 extra, and it helps us out a little bit, gives us a small little kickback on your order there. Links for everything will be in the description. And lastly, our merch store. I did put some new stuff up the last few weeks. We had some cool designs sent to us by one of our viewers and listeners, John Stokes. John, appreciate it. I hope I did justice by you with the products. I saw you put in an order, so I hope when you get them, you like them. Definitely tag us in some pictures of the product.
Yeah, quick point on that. If any of you guys know Marcus Cantarsi or Couscous, he streams all the time, and you want him every time he sees you in one of our awesome sweatshirts, hoodies, baseball tee, whatever, coffee mug. If you want him while he sees you wearing that or drinking coffee out of it to like do one of those like he did in the Neg story,
Yep.
you should buy one because it'll be worth every penny and he'll probably hate us for it. But that's why it's so funny.
If enough of you guys do get either one of the Don't Go Neg designs, any product for him, if we get enough sales on some of those, I will make Marcus an emote for his stream for that.
Yes, it's gonna be him dropping his ice cream cone on the ground. We'll turn it into a GIF.
I will find someone to do that because I don't know how.
It's okay, we'll figure it out.
But yeah, check all that stuff out. Links will be in the description for everything. Anything you want to say closing out?
No, that was everything, guys. Hope you enjoyed the episode. This is the Sideboard Podcast checking out.
See you guys. Happy 2021.
Hey.